Hi, this is Marc Lanthemann. I'm a Europe analyst here at Stratfor, and I'm joined today by Adriano Bosoni, one of my colleagues who is currently in Germany.
Hey Marc, it's good to be here.
Good to have you. So today we're going to talk about Spain. So it's the summer. Usually not much happens in Spain during the summer, but this time around it's quite exciting. This morning we saw results from a poll conducted by the Spanish press showing that a relatively newcomer to the political scene had gotten about 50% of intended votes. Now, this is huge when we're talking about Spain, because this is a country that had been dominated for the past, for its entire democratic history by two major parties. And for the first time, you have a third party coming, not quite at the levels yet of the two major ones, but really inching closer. So that's a very interesting development that I think, Adriano, if you have any thoughts on that, because that's really quite new.
Marc, it was a matter of time before something like this happened. With unemployment levels at record high levels in Spain, with the economic crisis going on, with a bailout on its banking sector, I am actually surprised that this did not happen before. And we have to think about this Podemos party in a similar way that we think about the Syriza party in Greece. This is an anti-system party with a very strong anti-establishment rhetoric that is criticizing the austerity measures that have been applied in Spain and in the European periphery by the European Union. And this is a party that is still at the point where it can promise things and keep growing in opinion polls, and at the same time keep some of its promises a bit vague. You know that this party has criticized the euro, but at the same time it has said that it does not want to go back to the peseta. So it's still at the point where it can make promises. But the thing is, this is not the only thing that's happening in Spain these days, right? We have people protesting against the monarchy when King Juan Carlos abdicated last month. We have presidents of the Catalonia regional government saying that the region will hold an independence referendum in November. So lots of things are happening in Spain these days, Marc.
You're absolutely right. This is nothing new for Spain. Spain, over the past few centuries, have always had this problem of how do you deal with the fact that your country is constituted of different individual regions that have their own identity, their own language, and their own standards of living and expectations of economic standard of living. Up until 2007, 2008, before the crisis, things were going pretty well in Spain. Money was flowing, credit was available, unemployment was relatively low, and all of these underlying political tensions that come from having a country that really is sort of cobbled together are now becoming increasingly apparent, and which is driving sort of this regionalization and this impetus by Catalonia in particular to want to separate from Spain. Now, we don't really think this is a viable proposition given the way the modern European economy is structured, but it really is giving cause of concern for Madrid. At the same time, we should be mindful of things like this new current of republicanism that followed, as you mentioned, Adriano, the abdication of King Juan Carlos, because you're slowly eroding what has been the guiding principle of Spanish government since the transition away from the Franco's dictatorship in 1975 when he died, and then in 1978 when the new constitution was framed. We are seeing more or less a decline and sort of the end game of this constitution and the end game of how the current political architecture of Spain can carry forward, which is why when we see things like a third party emerging pretty much out of nowhere and starting to take away the votes of those traditional established parties, it makes for a very interesting combination. So, Adriano, what do you see the long term, what the end game here?
Marc, that as you were saying, after the end of the dictatorship in Spain, they tried to create a constitutional order where a unitary centralist state was created, but regions were also created and were given different degrees of autonomy. That system, I think, is reaching the end of its natural life. And I do think that at some point, Spain will have to face a process of constitutional reform. And that issues such as creating a new republic or creating a federal state, which used to be taboo items or taboo issues only a few years ago, now they are being openly discussed by mainstream parties. That said, as you were discussing, most of Spain's problems are intimately linked to its geography and to its different pockets of population that have evolved for a long time with little to no connection with each other and have developed their own very strong regional identities. So even if a constitutional reform would be a step forward, it will not solve most of Spain's long-term problems, which, as we have said, are directly linked to its geography.
We certainly have some interesting times ahead for us in Spain. Thank you, Adriano, for joining me.
Thank you, Marc.
For more coverage on this topic and others, please join us at Stratfor.com.